Welcome to the Exchequer help video Setting Up Users by HBP Systems. In order to set up brand new users in Exchequer, you need to come to the Utilities menu here. Then go to System Setup and then go to Passwords. If you don't have option to get into the password settings or the utilities settings, it will probably be restricted under your user logon, so you will need to speak to your line manager in order to set up a password for you. Once you come into this password settings box, there are several things you can do within here. The first thing, if you're wanting to create a new user, you can copy an existing user. So for example, if you are setting up a new user to replace somebody that is left, this may be a particularly useful feature for you to use. If you highlight that user over on the left and select copy over on the right, it will then ask you to give this user a new username and a new password. It'll then ask you to confirm that password and then enter their full name and then in here give them an email address, and this will be used if they email transactions or reports out of Exchequer. That is then the easiest way to create a new user. Once you've selected OK, you can come into the access settings here and navigate to the folder you require to turn settings on or off as required. Another way to add a brand new user is actually come in here and select Add User over on the right hand side. It'll then ask you if you want to create a user with all the password accessing set to yes. If this is going to be a particularly high-level user, I would say yes, because it will tick all of those boxes for you, and you can then untick what you don't need. If it's quite a low-level user, I'd advise select no, and then you can have everything set up without any access, but then tick the boxes you need. So for the purposes of this exercise, I'll just say yes, and I'll give this a username. It tells me Rob actually already exists, as you can see here, so I can't create another Rob. So if I selected Rob1 for example, or Rob S, let's say for example, and give him a password, confirm that password, fill in his full name again and his email address. If I select OK and go onto the Access Settings tab, he'll have access to everything in all of these folders here. But what we do have the option to do is, let's say for example he wasn't going to use job costing at all, we could highlight that here and say Set Level to No, and it will set everything beneath that folder to No. And we can do that on numerous different folders if we need to. Obviously some of these folders have subfolders, so again that's where you could use the Set Level to No here. But then we can see that within Sales he does still have access to all of the other subfolders. Within here you can also delete users, so for example we may be setting up a new username for Rob, so I might want to come in here and delete his old one. And we can change some of the defaults. So what you may need to do is change a user's password within here. So you would highlight them over on the left and select Edit here and just change the password. What you can also see in here per user is there are some settings down here. And what those settings mean is they're basically going to use a default per username. So for example, every time that they add a sales receipt with invoice or a purchase payment with invoice, whether you want it to use a default account code, default authorization limits, default cost centers, departments, locations, general ledger codes, and some options on here as to whether they want to see the GL codes on the general ledger tree, the stock codes on the stock tree, and the product type on the stock tree, and also default report printer and default form printer. Another useful option within this password settings screen is the Reset Custom button over on the right. So if this user has reset their screen sizes, their default colours, their default font, and you wanted to reset that back to the custom sizes, you would just simply highlight the username over on the left and select the Reset Custom button on the right hand side. And please note the user doesn't have to be logged out to do this, but I would advise once you have reset their custom screen sizes to just ask them to log out and log back in just to refresh it through. That more or less covers everything that you need to know about setting up a new user in Exchequer. If there is anything else you need, please don't hesitate to contact the help desk. And thank you for listening.